In his famous Munich speech, Vice President JD Vance illustrated a significant disconnection between Americans and Europeans when he lamented European governments' relentless attacks on free speech as a betrayal of shared values, of values that Americans and Europeans share. Um, in fact, free speech never was a principle that Europeans promoted, observed, or had regard for. So far from a shared value, the philosophical differences between how Americans and Europeans regard free speech is one of the defining differences between the United States and the rest of the developed world. So one narrative that explains how Europeans got to this place where they are so draconian in their policing of speech in Europe. One narrative of this, one explanation is that, I think the dominant one, that is that after the Holocaust, Europeans were so shocked, Europeans with Germany and its collaborators in the lead, were so shocked and embarrassed by what they had done that they enacted strict speech codes with regard to neo-Nazism and Holocaust denial. Okay, so that's the origin point. And these laws created or kind of established cultural permission and a legal precedent for later restrictions on speech on whatever European governments deemed heinous later on. What other categories of heinous speech that were added to neo-Nazism and Holocaust denial. Okay, so anything for like racism and colonialism and sexism, homophobia, all, xenophobia, nativism, Islamophobia, transphobia, global warming denial, vaccine skepticism, and all these other thought crimes. So according to this narrative, Europe has simply slipped down the slippery slope of police speeching, okay, from Holocaust denial laws to the current draconian speech codes that stifle open inquiry and criminalize dissent. But in fact, Europeans never shared Americans' veneration of free speech, nor did they have much of a struggle against the natural impulse to police and criminalize speech. Okay, so some argue basically that Europeans, in contrast to Americans, outlawed expressions of Holocaust denial and Nazism, because Americans never did criminalize neo-Nazism and Holocaust denial. Okay, and so the argument is that that is because that this cultural permission to police speech and a legal precedent to police speech existed in Europe, but not in America, because Europeans were more shocked and repulsed by the Holocaust than Americans, and therefore they were more outraged by neo-Nazism and Holocaust denial. This is untrue. First, there's good evidence that Europeans were less repulsed and less outraged by the Holocaust than Americans. Then on top of that, the real reason the true reason Europeans found it were able and found it easy to outlaw Holocaust denial is that Europeans, like most peoples of the world and throughout history, Europeans always saw speech codes as commonsensical, okay, and a perfectly legitimate governmental tool, okay, and because of this, Europeans always found Americans' free speech sensibilities, their free speech fundamentalism, as bizarre and reckless. Now, to the degree that free speech was defended in Europe, it was defended on pragmatic grounds. Okay? The idea being that when people can express their ideas freely, the public benefits from a marketplace of ideas. Okay? So basically, that when people are allowed free speech, um, good ideas are heard, ideas are exchanged, and the result of this competition of ideas in the marketplace is good ideas and good policies. But what this pragmatic approach means, what it meant, is that when there's a market failure, quote unquote, when this marketplace of ideas produced bad ideas, then criminalizing their expression was seen as and still is today, seen as a perfectly reasonable remedy. Okay, so if the marketplace produces something bad, you outlaw it. By contrast, the conventional American approach to free speech is primarily moral, not pragmatic. Okay? Americans have been advocates of free speech because liberty is first in their minds, not a well-regulated marketplace of ideas. Americans fear and condemn government-policed speech not because it might diminish the marketplace of ideas and therefore stifle productive discussions and inventions that might benefit the society. Rather, they fear and condemn government police speech because they believe that it is morally offensive for the government to forcefully punish or intimidate anyone into silence. Okay, so certainly American champions of free speech do value the marketplace of ideas for pragmatic reasons, just like Europeans. But their primary concern is preserving a society of free men and women who are free to speak their minds without fear that their rulers might punish them for it. Now, America was not born this way. America was not born venerating free speech. Until the 20th century, the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, prohibited only federal authorities, only the national government, from policing speech, which left state and local governments to police speech according to the normal impulses and sensibilities and customs of local communities and the local laws of local communities. But over time, Americans made free speech the central core of American identity as the first article of faith in America's civil religion. And because of this, they began to enforce free speech nationally at all levels of government. This American approach to free speech is evident in the method that American governments have developed to disdain, delegitimize, and marginalize unpopular ideas. Okay, so Americans are not immune to being repulsed by certain ideas and wanting to make them go away, to delegitimize them and marginalize them. But they have this commitment to free speech. And so even though Americans are repeatedly tempted to outlaw speech that they consider to be beyond the pale, the preferred method that they have established to disavow and discourage these bad ideas is to withhold government contracts and government funding from people who voice them or organizations that voice these bad ideas. So, for example, the Ku Klux Klan has every legal right and ability to operate and disseminate its ideas freely in the United States. Okay? So it is legal to express racist ideas. But the KKK will not qualify for any form of government contract or funding. Okay, so the members of the KKK and the organization itself can speak their minds freely, but they're not entitled. Okay, so they're entitled to freedom to speak and exchange their ideas, but they're not entitled to government contracts or government funding. And this was affirmed by American courts in the early 1980s in a case called Bob Jones University versus the United States, in which the United States chose to withhold to deny tax-exempt status to Bob Jones University because the university disallowed interracial dating. Okay, and so you had here an example of this indirect approach to dealing with offensive ideas, okay, where the university can do whatever it wants, but the United States is not obligated to give it any sorts of again, funding or contracts, or in this case, a financial benefit. And this today is the same method that the Trump administration is adopting to combat the unprecedented wave of anti-Semitism washing over America's biggest cities and most prestigious, or formerly prestigious, colleges and universities. So in accordance with the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act of 1918 and 1919, the Trump administration has designated anti-Semitic discrimination as a Title VI violation of the Civil Rights Act, alongside discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin. And so, just like with discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin, the DOJ promises to prosecute anti-Semitic discrimination in American colleges and universities, as well as prosecuting anti-Semitic harassment, violence, and vandalism by individuals. Okay, so what's criminalized is not the speech. Okay? People can speak anti-Semitically. Okay, that is not a crime. What will be prosecuted, or what is prosecuted, is actions like harassment, violent attacks, vandalism by individuals, and discrimination by college administrations. And then additionally, the Trump administration also vows to enforce the Immigration and Nationality Act on foreign students who violate their visa applications by supporting activities that U.S. law defines as terrorist, okay, like promoting Hamas or etc. So the point is that what you can see here is a commitment to separate speech and protect speech while prosecuting actions. Okay, whereas in Europe you see a different approach. So the point is that free speech is not a principle that America shares with other Western nations. In fact, America's free speech fundamentalism is one of those quirks that makes the United States so puzzling to Europeans. Okay? Americans exalt and celebrate free speech as their first central and defining freedom, whereas Europeans regard it pragmatically as a practical instrument, like interest rates, that a government can calibrate to serve the society's shifting needs and desires at any given time. And so Europeans see free speech as just one element in constructing a productive and constructive and responsible marketplace of ideas. Americans, on the other hand, regard free speech religiously as a moral truth that is the foundation of a good and just society.